Your living room should feel like the heart of your home, the place where you can relax, entertain, and just enjoy being there. But the truth is, most living rooms aren't living up to their potential. They just kind of feel off, and you can't always pinpoint why. But the problem are a few small design mistakes that completely throw the space out of balance. And here's the thing, it's not about having an expensive sofa or the perfect Pinterest aesthetic. It's about making intentional choices that work for your space. And so in this video, you're gonna learn 8 of the most common living room design mistakes and how to avoid them. So mistake number 1 is ignoring scale and proportion. All right, so check out this room here. The undersized sofa doesn't match the length of the wall that it sits against. And so instead of anchoring the room, it just kind of floats awkwardly in too much empty space. This makes the entire seating area feel small and unfinished compared to the size of the room. And then also at the same time, the TV stand is another big mismatch. Its narrow, low frame just gets lost on that long blank wall, which exaggerates how empty the room feels around it. But on the contrary, a taller, wider console would balance the wall and make the TV setup feel intentional instead of temporary. And then at the same time, the small coffee table and the empty floor patches just highlight the scale problem even more, because everything is clustered in one corner, and so the room reads like it's half furnished rather than an open concept. And so if the homeowner had a bigger coffee table and a large rug beneath it, it would help to ground the seating area and make the proportions feel right. And by the way, a lot of the images you're seeing here are from people who've posted them on Reddit, so I appreciate the people who are being open to sharing their spaces and letting us take a little bit of a deeper dive into them. Okay, now design mistake number 2 is not prioritizing storage, and especially closed storage. I mean, take a look at this living room, right? It just shows how a lack of closed storage can lead to so much clutter. The open shelves and just every surface in this space is packed with toys, books, and random objects, which makes the entire room feel chaotic and visually noisy. And because there are no cabinets or concealed storage options, everything that isn't decorative just ends up out in the open. And so instead of feeling spacious, which is probably what they wanted out of this room, it just looks smaller and busier than it really is because of all this stuff. You know, the large sectional and TV console already dominate the layout of this room, and they're not leaving any space for storage solutions that could balance things out. And so without a plan here, the items just overflow onto the sofa, the floor, the coffee table, and it's just a total mess. So to fix this, you want to add multifunctional pieces like storage ottomans, a TV console with doors on it, or even wall-mounted cabinets, because closed storage allows you to tuck everything away, leaving the rest of the room clean and visually balanced. Okay, now mistake number 3, and I see this one all the time, is pushing all the furniture against the walls, right? So this living room shows exactly what happens when you push that furniture against the walls, which is the center of the room just feels empty and the seating area loses its sense of connection. And so instead of creating this cozy hub, the arrangement leaves a void in the middle of the room. As you can see, the 2 sofas here are just placed too far apart from each other, which makes both having conversation and viewing the TV, which is sitting on top of the fireplace, really uncomfortable. And so rather than feeling inviting, the layout feels cold and disconnected. And the wide empty gap in the center of the room highlights all the wasted floor space. You know, even though it keeps the entry path clear, it looks more like poor planning than intentional openness. And so to avoid this kind of poor layout, you want to remove one of these sofas and rotate the other so it faces the TV and creates a tighter seating zone. And if you need more seats, then you can add a chair or a slim bench on the opposite side of the coffee table. This makes the layout functional, balanced, and it still keeps this entryway open. All right, who's gonna help with number 4? You gonna help with number 4? All right, so design mistake number 4 is over decorating or under decorating. She is so cute. Now, this living room shows how under decorating makes good pieces fall flat. You know, the white sofa is comfortable and the wood TV stand has presence, but without supporting elements, the room feels unfinished. There's no rug, no art, and no layers to anchor this space. And so instead of reading as clean and minimal, the bare walls and floors just make it look empty and lifeless. You know, the corner chair becomes dead space because it isn't integrated into the seating area, and with bags piled on top of it, it just ends up looking like storage rather than part of the room's design. And the lack of a specific focal point also just weakens the layout. Without a rug to define the zone or art to draw the eye in any particular direction, the sofa and TV feel disconnected from the rest of the room. And so to avoid both of these extremes, aim for balance. Add a few larger intentional pieces like a properly sized rug, art or mirrors for the walls, and layered textures like pillows and throws to make the room feel styled but still breathable. Now, design mistake number 5 is not defining zones in an open floor plan. Okay, so in this apartment, the living room, kitchen, and workspace all bleed into each other with no clear definition. And so the result is a big rectangle that feels more like one giant room rather than 3 individual functional spaces. The sofa's pushed against the wall, and the rug is so undersized, so the seating area doesn't feel anchored. And instead of creating a cozy living room, it just looks like the couch is just floating along that wall. The TV and desk are lined up in the same stretch, so the workspace overlaps with the entertainment area, which makes it harder to focus or relax in either zone. And so to fix this, you need to use elements like larger rugs, furniture placement, or low shelving to carve out separate areas. Even a console table behind the sofa or a larger rug under that living room zone would create the boundaries that this space is missing. And so speaking of rugs, living room design mistake number 6 is choosing the wrong size of rug or skipping a rug altogether. And so here's just one example, but I could give you 1,000 examples of where this is happening, because here, as you can instinctively tell, the rug is way too small for the furniture, right? The coffee table is sitting on it, but the sofa's legs are just barely on. And so this makes the seating area feel disconnected instead of anchored. And so a rug this undersized creates this kind of floating effect where the furniture feels like it's drifting apart instead of working together as a unified zone. And small rugs also make the room look visually smaller because they highlight all the empty floor space around them instead of tying everything into one grounded arrangement. But at the same time, without a rug, there's no anchor to define the living area or add warmth and texture to the space. And so to avoid this, you want to size up. Ideally, the front legs of the sofa and chairs should rest on the rug. And if your space allows, choose a rug large enough for all the furniture to sit fully on top of it for a cohesive, balanced look. Very, very rarely will someone buy a rug that's too large for the space. So if you've got a rug in your space and it doesn't quite feel right, you can be almost certain that it's too small. All right, now living room design mistake number 7 is forgetting any sort of personal touches. Right? You can see in this living room, it shows how a space with just the basics of sofa, chairs, and tables ends up feeling so generic instead of actually feeling welcoming. I mean, the furniture is practical, but there's nothing to reflect the personality of the people who live here. This seating area with the gray sofa feels comfortable, I guess, but the bare walls and the lack of any accessories make the room just feel unfinished. Without artwork, photos, or any sort of meaningful decor, it reads more like a staged rental rather than a lived-in home. And then the pair of checkered armchairs with the side table and lamp that you see here, they do create a bit of a cozy corner, but again, there's no individuality, right? The setup just feels functional and totally impersonal, like it's waiting for a designer to add the final touches. So to avoid this, you want to layer in personality through framed photos, artwork, travel souvenirs, or any sort of objects that have sentimental value, because these small touches turn a house into a home. Having tons of personal memorabilia on display isn't necessarily the best look in a lot of cases, so you do want to exercise restraint. But having at least a little bit of personality injected into a room can go a long way. Okay, living room design mistake number 8 is relying on a single light source. And generally that means a single overhead light. You know, these lights just leave a space either too bright in one spot or too dark everywhere else, especially in larger or oddly shaped rooms. So as you see in this living room, the single ceiling fixture leaves the sofa corner completely dark and shadowy, while the entryway is overly lit. And so the uneven brightness makes the space feel cold and unbalanced instead of cozy. And then this second living room has the same problem, right? The overhead light is too dim to illuminate the entire space, and it creates glare on the TV. And so even with furniture in place, the room feels flat and lifeless because the lighting doesn't reach where it needs to go. And so to avoid this, you need to layer your lighting. So that means adding floor lamps and table lamps in darker corners, wall lamps for ambiance, and ideally dimmers so you can adjust brightness based on the time of day. Because having multiple light sources will create a warmer, much more balanced atmosphere. And so fixing all these mistakes isn't about following a bunch of strict rules. It's about making your living room work better for you. So whether it's upgrading your lighting, choosing the right rug size, or just adding a few personal touches, these small changes can completely transform how your space looks and feels. So my advice is to take a fresh look at your living room, decide which of these changes will make the biggest impact, and then start there. You'll be surprised at how much better the room feels once everything flows and has a specific purpose. So I've left links to a few other videos about living rooms in the description below, or if you want to see how to do a living room the right way, check out this video up here. I think you'll like it. I'll see you there.